This is Soulforge, Minecraft Bedrock's biggest private SMP, and this is me. At the time you're seeing me, I am currently co-head of one of the most powerful alliances in our server's history. We currently have control of Spawn, and I have begun work on instituting a democratic government. But shortly after beginning, I realized that this was not what the people wanted. And without people, you can't really have a democratic government. So, I backed out. I quit constructing my Senate building, and after a while, our Grand Alliance broke up. Spawn went back to being technically still our territory, but it was really unclaimed. My plans had failed yet again, but at this point, I was used to it. Ever since I joined the SMP right before it started its second season, I had been completely out of my league. I was one of the worst PvPers and worst content creators in the entire SMP, and played no major roles throughout Season 2. I was enslaved. My plans to escape my slavery failed multiple times until I was saved by a friend. I was humiliated time and time again. I knew very well what failure was. So I did what I always did. I got back up. I kept going. There was only one advantage I had over my enemies in Season 2, and it was my resilience and determination. That's what kept me in the frame at all in Season 2, and it was what would lead me to success now. So I went to a new frontier, combat. I have been absolutely garbage at the art of combat for a while now, due to a lack of continuous practice and changing devices and such. Fourth not. It's not a word, but who cares? I now turned and poured my efforts into this art. For an entire week, I trained my brains out. And when I came out the other side, I was ready to do battle. There was one man on the server that I wanted to kill. This man was named Zav. This freaking guy had humiliated me in at least 2 other events, beating me twice in 1v1s without breaking a sweat. And I had had enough. It was my turn to kick this man's rear end. And that's what I did. I fought him in 2 battles and beat him twice. I had finally achieved my goals of actually being able to PvP. I had actually done it. But something was wrong. Yeah, I had trained to get better, and I had trained to take down Zav. But if I was really being honest with myself, the one thing I had wanted, the one thing I had always wanted, ever since I really got onto this server, was to prove myself. Because as soon as I found out how much out of my league I was, the one thing I had wanted to do was to just be seen as an equal. And right now, it was pretty clear to me that nobody was impressed. Yeah, sure, I was technically co-leader of one of the largest alliances in server's history, but I was really a figurehead. Even now, I was really more of a figurehead. The real leader of my team, Ray, who is the real leader, I was just a figurehead, and I knew that. I knew that I was just more of a mascot than anything else. And this victory wasn't even that impressive. All I had done was taken out a mid-tier player. So what? I could finally actually PvP, but I would never be like the greats at this rate. I had not done anything to bring me into the spotlight, and I was still not getting the recognition I wanted. I needed a plan, and for a while, I didn't get it. But one day, an idea came into my head. But little did I know, this plan, this idea, I would sacrifice everything on this server for it. It had been about 2 weeks since the end of my training arc, and very little had happened. Over the course of about a month, I didn't really do much. There was an event held by an older gentleman within our SMP by the name of Chicken, in which I was able to successfully get a ridiculous amount of shulker shells, which I didn't even need. But more importantly, I was able to obtain an elytra, which I had not had an elytra, due to the end having been destroyed way earlier in the SMP. This meant that I could now fly, and this would cut down my travel time massively. There was one issue though, and it was that I obviously needed to give it mending. But there was another issue. I had noticed more and more that my teammates were almost never online, especially in comparison to me. And it was getting really annoying at this point. And this is where it really started to give me problems, because we didn't even have a mending villager. Like, how do you not even have a mending villager, bro? So I had to go and get my own mending villager, which wasn't too bad, but it was still quite annoying we didn't have one. However, there was another issue with this, because almost all villages on the map have been destroyed or plundered, or the villagers are all dead. But there is good news here, because I, in my many travels on foot across the overworld and nether to get back and forth between my base and my team's base, had discovered multiple villages with villagers still inside of them. I went to one of these villages and immediately began looking for a good mending villager, and it actually didn't take me too long, which is actually quite surprising. However, since I didn't have any official way to zombify my villager here, I had to do things the old-fashioned way and pay a ridiculous amount of emeralds. But that was fine, because our team base was absolutely stacked with materials for gathering emeralds. So I just traveled back to there. But on my way back to the village, a player named Stabs logged on. Stabs, apparently, was in a good mood today, because he said he wanted to trade with me. Now, I wasn't too keen on necessarily trading with the man. After all, it was almost certainly a trap. Stabs was an enemy, and he was probably looking to just get another free kill. But I was bored, and I low-key wanted to fight. But I already knew there was no way on Earth I was going to be able to fight Stabs. Stabs is an S tier. In the meantime, I am currently officially an F tier. Although, actually, after my recent training arc, I was, without doubt, at least a C tier. And in my opinion, probably a low B tier with a bit more practice. But that didn't matter, because Stabs would still be way beyond my level. And there was no way I was going to beat him on my own. So, to ensure that I survived if a fight broke out, and also to ensure fair play if there was any sort of trade that actually happened, I called for backup for my team. However, no one responded except for one guy by the name of Xeon. Xeon was a player that I figure was significantly better than me at combat, but not too much better. But more important than his skill level was that he currently held the basic mace. The basic mace on our SMP is a mace that can have enchantments, just not actually good ones, basically. You can give it fire aspect, wind burst, etc., etc., but it can't have breach or density. The breach mace was deleted a long time ago at this point. The density mace was in the hands of my teammate Ray, who was now actually leader. I had made him leader of my team shortly after stepping down from having an alliance and a government, as I felt I was inadequate. However, he had graciously made me co-leader as well, which was very nice of him, and was certainly not a role I deserved. However, Ray was not available today, but that didn't matter. I was certain that I and Xeon could definitely take down Stabs if he were to try anything. So, we went to spawn together. But there was an issue. Stabs had logged off. So we waited. And waited. And waited. Until finally, somebody logged on. But it wasn't Stabs. It was Eclipse, an ex-ally of ours. This meant that if Eclipse and Stabs were to team up, our 2v1 against a better player would become a 2v2 against players more skilled than us. We would still have the advantage of the basic mace, but at the end of the day, Xeon was pretty sure that it was not going to be enough. And to be honest, I didn't think so either. But I was pretty sure that there wasn't any guarantee that Eclipse would come to aid Stabs at all. But Xeon was convinced, and he ran for it. It turns out, however, that I was correct. Eclipse never came to spawn. But I was in a predicament now. I was still waiting for Stabs to log back on, and for the trade to begin. But if Stabs was dealing treacherously and attempting to kill me, I had no one to give me backup now. It would be even worse if Eclipse came and sided with Stabs rather than me. I would be dead in seconds. But I decided to wait. And eventually, Stabs logged back on. And this was incredible. Stabs was right underneath me, right beneath the bridge, and I had a TNT minecart that I could drop right down and shoot right next to him. On this server, TNT minecarts do double damage, which means that if I were to shoot this right next to him, Stabs would get instantaneously killed. Even if he had a totem, I would just be able to drop down and kill him in seconds. If he was still loading in, there would be absolutely nothing he could do. And even if he was still alive, I was pretty confident that I would be able to kill him. And even if I wasn't able to kill him, the fact that I would be able to chase away an S tier, that was bound to at least get me some level of recognition. Even if it did put a target on my back from Stabs being mad at me. But there was an issue with this. I didn't want to kill Stabs, because I wasn't sure that he was actually still trying to kill me. Now, granted, it was almost certain that he actually was trying to kill me. But if there was any chance that he was actually trading and trying to be peaceful, I didn't want to just stab him in the back by killing him. So I didn't. But as he just stood there, longer and longer, I felt like something was wrong about the situation. And after a while, I decided that enough was enough. It was time to get ready for battle. So I ran further up the ramp and began splashing pots down on myself and eating gaps. But I wasn't ready for what was going to happen next. Stabs ran up behind me, and I presume he noticed me preparing for combat. I had made a grave mistake, and I realized it almost instantly. He immediately attacked me and chopped through almost all of my health in seconds. I got knocked into a hole, and he was right on my tail. I was very quickly presented with only two options. I could use my axe and try and fight back against stabs, or I could keep chugging gapples and try to look for a way to get out. But at this point, stabs was hitting me so fast that he was killing me faster than chugging gapples could heal me. And if I tried to fight back with my axe, I would be slaughtered. No matter what I did now, I was dead. I couldn't think of a way around it. And that's what happened. I died. At first, all I could really think was of despair. And the situation back at base didn't make things any easier either. I found out that I had severely overestimated my team's ability to keep enough villagers to actually get a significant amount of gear. And I was forced to scavenge around for random pieces. And as a result, I was kept working for quite a while to get back to the point I was before the duel. What was even worse was that I managed to lose my elytra, meaning I was forced to walk yet again. My mending villager became almost useless to me. Although, now that we didn't have a mending villager, I was forced to go back and use it again. And things just kept getting worse, because shortly after this, I was in need of nether wart, as I had run completely out of potions. And when I asked around for it, I found out that the entire team base, indeed, potentially the entire team, appeared to not have any nether wart. And this shocked me. I had figured that somewhere within our base, we kept a little nether wart, or at least one of our team members would have some. But it appeared that there was no nether wart in our possession. And I was just shocked. But there was nothing to do about it except go get more. And at first, I had assumed this was probably impossible. But due to my teammates informing me about it, I learned that while our world border in the overworld is 8k by 8k, the nether border, instead of being 1k by 1k, is 3k by 3k. Which means that if you made a portal outside of 1k by 1k, in theory, you would get instantaneously killed by the world border. So I had assumed that we only had a 1k by 1k nether border. So this was news to me. But there was nothing for it. I had to go outside the old borders that I knew in the nether. And I was kept searching for quite a while. But finally, after traveling almost the entirety of the way to the world border, I finally found an unrated nether fortress. And lo and behold, I was able to successfully find nether wart.